I'm stoked to be here with you.
Same.
It's an honor. Truly.
It's an honor to be here with you.
Beautiful. So, a little bit of context. Satori School, welcome to the podcast. It is a nonprofit. We're devoted to doing our best to guiding humanity back to inner peace. I felt from the moment that I met you, you were the most grounded and peaceful person that I've met in Colorado in my month of being here. And for context, we've only played spike ball like 4 times. I don't think we
did acro once.
We did acro
during the 4th of July
on a
top
rooftop
of the building,
10 feet away from the edge.
17
People
stories
were like,
up.
Please don't do this. This is too scary. And that's just, I felt in the way that you hold yourself, in the way that you speak, in your laughter, in your joy. I was just telling Claudia, I was like, babe, Sam is, what the fuck? He's got the fruit. And if you've heard Jesus is saying, you will know them by their fruit. It's something that I feel so deeply in you. So.
Yeah, I felt that connection with you right away when I met you.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Well, you just have a deep presence of who you are and being who you are without pretense, without being anyone else.
Thank you.
That's what I feel from you.
So I know nothing about you, but I want to open this up by asking you. So Satori is a Japanese word. It means to awaken or enlightenment. And I'm curious to know, what does awakening mean to you?
A few things come to mind. Some people will say that learning is when you go to a classroom and someone's at the front of the classroom there to instruct you, right? And that's a very sort of Western way of learning. And yet there are gurus who talk about going deep inside themselves, and that learning is really a sense of remembering. So I think that when I consider enlightenment or consciousness or those kinds of things, it's really an unburdening ourselves of the de-geniusing that's been placed upon us by some of those external sources, teachers standing at the front of the room as a metaphor.
And so how and when did this realization happen for you? That's a profound explanation.
I think I was always curious if there was more. I think that's just sort of the thread, we're just pulling at different threads as we go through, looking for different teachers. And ultimately, I had the sense that meditation was important.
Yeah.
And I tried for the first time to meditate, and it was laughable. It was the most awful, uncomfortable. I'm gonna sit. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna sit for 5 minutes. And it was like, if you've ever seen an animation of like a little particle trapped inside a glass vial that just wants out.
Yeah.
And it couldn't get out. And it was like, ah! So there was this moment of being hot, being cold, being like horny, being totally uninterested in life, bored, and like excited, and like all of the emotions you could possibly put inside a little jar. And it was like, it was terrible. It was so hard. And
around what age was this?
28.
Okay, and how old are you now?
45.
Okay.
45.
And so with that awareness of the sort of chaos that was happening, what was your thoughts at the time?
I wanted to go deeper into me and understand what was that chaos, what was that unsettledness inside of me. And it took a while. I had a mantra to begin with: be still and know I am God.
Wow.
From Psalms 3. And so there's this power to that I found. And then as I was going through, I'm like, well, is that my mantra? Because the person that gave it to me said, well, this is really mine. Here's something you could start with. So it was like a starter pack. And I'm like, okay, I'll start with this. And then I found Self-Realization Fellowship through Autobiography of a Yogi, through
Yogananda.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And then from there started the lessons. And it was like 6 months at that time they were letters. Now it's all digital. But I got a letter in the mail and it was like, here's where we start. This is the monkey mind. I don't think they call it the monkey mind, but this is like the disorganized chaos of the mind.
Whoa.
And then there's a sense of being. And so I took that path, and it's all about the scientific method of meditation. So I started there, and then I stayed with it. And I would set a timer. Okay, 10 minutes. I'm going to do a 10-minute meditation. And then I would go a little bit into the thing. Oh, is this timer going to go off? I don't know. Is that timer on? That's a good timer. What if it doesn't go off? So the mind was still going. And so finally I resolved to doing my meditation before I went to bed at night. And I would turn off everything, set my alarm for the next morning, and then just go and meditate for as long as felt right. And I would go until I found that sense of peace, which I eventually found. And it just has gotten deeper. And it's not that I meet God every night, so to speak, when I go to my meditation, but there's a sense of stillness there. When I arrive at that stillness, it's just a question of how long do I want to be in that sense of well-being and stillness.
Wow. I feel that you have gone through this journey. It is so felt. How long has it taken you to sort of get to the levels of peace and calmness? And just for context for people listening, when I'm around you, you're so grounded, you're so peaceful and joyful, and you have a childlike essence to you that shines forth, but also this strong, mature adult with a very high degree of discernment to you that I can feel, despite having never actually seen it or heard it. I just can feel it in you. Did you notice that as you sort of calmed your waters internally that, whoa, I'm so much able to better discern the energies and the people and the decisions that I'm making? And what was that? How long was that journey?
Well, I'm still on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a continual journey. There are moments of sort of peak realizations and moments. It's kind of like, have you ever studied a language just to get to a point?
Spanish.
And you're fluent, aren't you?
I can speak it. I wouldn't say I'm fluent.
Okay.
I have some breaking points.
Have you ever had a dream in Spanish?
No, I haven't.
There's
I've
a
had
certain
people
moment
speaking
like that.
to me in Spanish, but not a full dream.
Okay. There's a certain moment at which you sort of do the work of learning a language. And then the next day you have a moment where you feel like, I can speak this language, right? It's all the working up until, and then you sort of go, oh, wait a minute. A little bit like, I don't know, Neo in the Matrix was like, I know Kung Fu. There's sort of like this moment like, well, but do you really, So I think for me, it's a little bit like that. You get to these sort of moments, but it's not defined. You just have a sense of like, oh, I'm different. It's different. And part of my experience where I really felt a shift was when I went to Burning Man and chose to be silent for a week.
Wow.
And that being in my silence in a chaotic, crazy environment was another level for me to go and sit. And I guess the world's trying to sell you on its whatever, right? So it might be sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, right? But there's a sense of you being sold by it. There's a context around you. And then there's the sense of how much of that do I accept? So by going inside and being silent and still being in it gave me a chance to feel a little bit more free in a way and to get a separation from it so I could question it a little bit more. And that was profound. So there was a certain calm in that chaos at Burning Man by choosing to be in sort of an active meditation for a week. And I'm still sitting with the lessons that are coming through. So it's like you have a conscious way of learning and then an unconscious or subconscious way of learning. And so what are those like shower thoughts where you go, oh, and your brain has been working on it all along in the background.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of this work is just sitting with it. And there's an example of someone who did an I am meditation for 30 years. And not continuous, like he still ate and walked through the world, but like that was the meditation, to just sit with I am. And that's it for 30 years.
Wow.
But think of something so simple, one letter and then two letters and two words. It's like, that's not a lot of content.
No.
And yet it's profound and it keeps reaping benefits. So I think it's just, I don't have a sense of getting to know all of it, or, really it's just getting to know me a little bit more each time and it.
What is the I am?
We can meditate on that for 30 years. The I am is, I have this sense of who is saying this right now, who the person that I am with you. And I also have a sense that I'm the spiritual being inside of this physical body having this experience. And so I'm no more in my body than I am the voice that's telling me that I'm the thing that's hearing the thing. So it's sort of like this reverberation. You can keep going. If you're a mathematician, it's like a derivative of a derivative of a derivative, or whatever. Where do you get to the source? And I think that's really the question of meditation itself, is to sit with that question, that maybe there isn't a single answer to it, except it becomes a feeling of presence and oneness. That's the deep sense of meditation, of getting to that place and just, I'm part of it. It's part of me. I don't know what it is. I may never know, and I'll just keep showing up in love. So for me, that the center, the core, the juiciness of it is that loving sense of well-being. That's what it is. That's what I am.
Wow. It's a good definition for God.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful because I think that there's a sort of large percentage of mankind that sees God as only transcendent. It's very prevalent in people that are sort of Bible belts or hardcore Christians, and they see the external of God above, and I am not worthy, and there's a lot of weird shame and guilt that comes with it. But I love when people have felt the immanence of God and the fact that it is both transcendent and immanent within us. And if you look at Yogananda or Ramana Maharshi or any of the great sages, Buddha or avatars of this earth, a lot of them, it's a realization from within. And have you felt the differences between transcendent and immanent?
I'd love to hear how you experience it.
Well, my first moment in Satori that completely changed my life and did an absolute 720 through 360s and just came out on the other side of the world. I sold my businesses. I completely sold everything, and my whole physical appearance shifted. I was a completely different person. I was much more grounded and peaceful. And it all happened because there was one moment. It was actually my first experience on mushrooms. And what's funny is later experiences on mushrooms were never the same. I thought that this was, oh, wow, this is mushrooms. Oh, my God. It turns out this was just kind of a special experience that was karmically earned. So that's my intuition of it. And what unfolded was it started slowly as a feeling of absolute bliss and joy. And I had read many books by different sages and avatars in the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and Ramana Maharshi's book. And what I recognized in that bliss was that this also needs to be surrendered to God, because this is a level of consciousness where you can sort of get super excited and stay there and sort of an MDMA-ish feeling, and it's beautiful. But I remember sitting down in this bliss and just letting go of it, and a mantra that sort of came through was, "To thee, O Lord, I surrender everything." And I was repeating this, and slowly and surely the bliss sort of faded, and it went into an infinite state of sublime peace. And that was in that moment I realized, wow, this is a whole new level of consciousness that is infinitely more powerful and greater than this other level of consciousness that felt so good, and it could have possibly been something where I got stuck. But what was radiating out was a sense of perfection. It was within me radiating out. It was absolute peace. It was a timeless sense. There was no time. Everything was moving in a sort of a slow motion fashion. I was completely silent during the whole experience. I was crying, but not like sobbing. Tears were just falling out of the eyes. And what was also happening was everything that I looked at, no matter what it was, there was a shimmer. It was a radiance of God that was shining out of everything that I looked at. It didn't matter what it was. A bottle of alcohol because there was a bar somewhere over to the side, a tree, wood, everything. And in that awareness came through a knowingness. It wasn't a verbal words that came through the mouth. It was just a knowingness, sort of a download intuition that said, there is no separation between me and that wood, me and that bottle, me and that. I am that bottle. I am the wood. I am this I am everything. And it was a sort of infinite moment of experiencing totality and allness. And so it was so beautiful to feel how, whoa, within me is all this allness, and outside of me is this allness, and there's no separation. So it was a mix of transcendent and immanent. That would be my best.
I love that, and I'm curious if you're willing to answer as I hear you describe that deep sense of oneness and being with, right? Where is the I in you when it comes to that I am statement? How would you relate that to your experience?
I would say it's non-local, so it's impersonal. The sort of lowercase I, the ego self, dissolves, and then this reverentially capitalized I, which is the totality of everything, emerges, sort of like the veil of Maya. Are you familiar with Maya? Like dissolves, and it's just like, whoa, okay.
It's kind of like the Matrix scene when you see just the symbols.
Just the symbols.
Right?
Yeah. That was what the shimmering felt like.
Yeah. I've had an experience like that. Mine was also related to plant medicine.
Okay.
And it was an ayahuasca journey.
Oh, tell me.
The first one, right? So like you said, like, oh, all of them like this? No. The first one was just blast off, right? And initially, I wasn't getting into it at all. I was cold and very uncomfortable and sitting in a meditative position, just waiting. And I got colder and colder. I'm like, oh man. So I put on, I'm inside, right, with other friends. And it was in Keystone. It was 14 degrees outside. So it was legitimately cold outside, and someone let the garage open. So it was cold inside, and part of what I was feeling was that just coldness in me. So I put on my down jacket. I get inside my down sleeping bag with a down jacket, and I'm like, I'm going to get warm. I know it's going to happen. Someone lit a fire, and they had a fireplace going, and all of a sudden, just like this warmth and love emanated through. And so it was literally the cocoon, right? I was in the cocoon, and everything was heating up to this perfect temperature. And I didn't want to move at all because everything I felt was just this fabric of love.
Wow.
And I had this visualization or this visual moment of seeing other particles, if you can imagine, like little stars, but everything was stars. Okay, so there's like no space. It was just everything being stars. And screaming, I'm alive! Are you? Oh my God, isn't this cool? Hey, yeah! It's like this celebration of life itself and feeling that fabric of everything being connected in that moment. So that was very similar to, I think, what you've described, and less visual in a way. It was more of a feeling of being held by an infinite intelligence. It was like, at some point I just started laughing because I realized that all the problems I thought I had, all the concerns were so small, so insignificant in this much bigger picture. I just couldn't help but laugh at the inconsequentiality of those quote unquote problems.
Whoa. And did you walk away from that experience completely shifted?
Yes. It was at that time and maybe still the top experience of my life. And I kept looking for anything that might top it, and it just opened me up in such a way where I got to look inside in a deeper way, right? And pull back. It's like, in one way, we have these two different sides of us. We have the logical brain, and we have this kind of creative mind that really runs the subconscious. And the other is the conscious brain. There's a more unconscious, subconscious. And it felt like it just shut down the unnecessary parts of the logical mind that were always in the way and always taking control, like the 99% of the time, and then the 1% of the time, that other voice. And it helped shift and balance those two sides.
Wow. Satori sounds like this experience. Satori in Japanese is supposedly recognized as full Buddhahood, when you've sort of embodied the Buddha fully. Are you familiar with Dr. Hawkins and his work?
Oh, definitely. The map of consciousness.
Map of consciousness. So Buddha was at 1,000, Christ was at 1,000, Krishna was at 1,000, which is the highest level of consciousness. The human body can't go higher than 1,000, at least right now, because of the nervous system. It can't support that much light and energy coming through it. Maybe we've evolved since Hawkins did these calibrations. But Satori calibrates at 1,000 in the scripture, so they say. It's the full Buddhahood. But there's this thing called Kensho. Kensho is the glimpse of Satori. It's the trailer to the movie. It's something that if you have gathered up enough positive karma through all your lifetimes, you get to have this experience. And it's something that they say radically shifts the being, and their perspective of life and their entire life in general just completely changes. And I remember a week or two after this experience, suddenly Satori came to me, this word, and I'm doing some research on it. And then I read Kensho, and it was an instant knowingness that was what the experience was. It was a glimpse of the infinite. And it's been so beautiful since that moment, because life is just so much more peaceful, so much more calm, so much more grounded. And there's a sense of purpose that just wasn't there before. And it sort of gave me the confidence to walk away from the life that I was so deeply rooted in before and embrace this new way of being, a new way of living that I was honestly too afraid to start living. So did you go through a similar experience?
I did, and it's a courageous moment. Talking of Hawkins, it's 200, right? Courage is at that level of 200. In fact, the dice, we'll look at these later, but these are somewhat based on that system to look at the different numbers on that scale of consciousness and the non-linear nature of that scale where a 1 point jump from 500 or 499 to 500, which Newton didn't make, which Einstein didn't make. They were right there under,
Freud.
which 500 was love.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's an interesting thing to talk about because it takes courage to get beyond, but that's part of the beauty of all of this is our evolution as a spirit is to get these glimpses into. And one of my glimpses was A Course in Miracles.
Oh, so good.
And the opening line, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
Wow. Yes.
And so to sit with that is to hear your story when you talk about having this different life and then choosing a different life, choosing to change your physical appearance, choosing to show up differently.
Yeah.
That's that courage, but also realization. And for me, the realization was that I had been living in this idea of a dualistic world, hot, cold, love, hate, that kind of thing. And then this, A Course in Miracles, opened up my eyes to a monistic version. I never really thought about what monastery means or monism or monk or whatever. And it means one. Not two things, but one. And the only thing then is God. And the only thing is love, right? Love is God, God is love. And so everyone, I think, unfortunately, the word God has been misused so much that it's just contentious. Right?
Yes.
And so it's like, how do you get to the context of understanding what that is for you? And maybe it goes by a different name, or maybe you don't even like that I would say something like that.
Yeah.
But the idea for me of saying that God is love, love is God, and being able to use interchangeably universe, and like, I ultimately don't know. And I'm okay not knowing what the title for that is.
Yeah.
But Buckminster Fuller talked about the universe, God, being everything that's not me and me.
Wow.
And so my point in bringing up the Course in Miracles is to say that when I embrace that love is all there is, and you hear it in songs, you see it in poems, it's all around us, and when you begin to open your eyes to that, it's like, oh, wow. And so I've always wanted, my goal in life is to believe more in what I think to be true, right?
Yeah.
So in one way, it's like, okay, your eyes open and you have the courage to go, oh, I think this is probably how it is, not this other way. Well, then how much did you commit to that new belief system, that new idea, that new knowingness?
Right, exactly. One could call that the integration process. You went through the experience, but how much do you believe in it?
100%. And so there's a story of, Buckminster Fuller, you familiar with?
I've heard his work, but I don't recall quotes or anything.
So he's the geodesic dome guy.
Yes.
Like the Epcot Center, and then he had a whole bunch of inventions, wrote 29 books, and was a humanist and a futurist and just a beautiful human. There was a moment in his life where he walks to the end of this pier at Lake Michigan. Okay. So it's called the Lake Michigan Dialogues, if you ever want to read the book, great book. But at that point in time, he was at Yale, and he had seen a lot of people be very successful by cheating and lying and stealing. And that didn't feel right to him. So he didn't want to do that, and yet he wasn't making very much money. It seemed like that was working in business. People were doing that and making lots of money.
Yeah.
And his daughter had just died of spinal meningitis, and he had failed a promise to her. So he was in this super low point in his life, and his idea was, I'm a good swimmer. I'll swim out into the lake as far as I can, and I'll just give up. He was ready to die. He was going to kill himself. And so as he's ready to jump into the water, he hears a voice that says, your life does not belong to you. You are a child of the universe.
Whoa.
And it goes on, this is about a dialogue that he has with this voice that's not him. He's like, this is not inside me. This is an external source having a conversation, which makes him sound kind of crazy. But that's what it was. And so at that point forward, he decided he was going to live, that he did belong to the universe, that he was part of a chain of events that were intentional, that whatever it was that he was here to do still needed to be accomplished.
Oh, beautiful.
And so he dedicated himself to serving the greatest number of people he could without thinking about compensation or himself. And he felt like if he did that, he says, nature is most efficient if often and normally at the last moment.
Wow.
So that full faith. So he did a few things around that. One, he decided again to go and serve as many people as he could. And two, he called himself Bucky B, right? So he was a guinea pig B. B for Bucky, right? Instead of Buckminster Fuller, Bucky. People call him Bucky.
Okay.
So guinea pig B was going to take on experiments with full faith that whatever was supposed to happen would happen through him, and he would find some sort of being taken care of, whatever that meant, in the process. He defined wealth by how many forward days can you take care of yourself and others.
Yeah.
So he felt like that would come to him if only he was being this agent of nature.
Wow.
And that if he died in the process, well, he was going to kill himself anyway. So everything from there was bonus laps.
Wow.
And that felt like 100% belief. Now, I can't say it was because only he could say that if he believed it was 100%. But imagine knowing that every forward day is that gift. That's your bonus lap.
Yeah. Whoa.
And so he would, every month, he'd pay his bills. The first of the month or whenever they were due, right? He'd pay his bills. And whatever extra money he had, he would spend to zero, right? So he would give all that money to causes that he believed in.
Damn.
100%. So his bank account was empty on purpose. Some people have done that, not on purpose.
Whew.
To zero.
Yeah.
And so there are people that criticize Bucky as a businessman, saying, well, gosh, he wasn't very good. Look, he emptied his bank account. That's not very smart.
Mm-hmm.
But for I think it was the last 2/3 of his life, because he was sort of 30 years old or so, and then he died when he was 80-something, but whatever the math comes out to be, a little bit more than half of his life, he spent with this mentality of, I'm going to give everything I can. And he never had to want for anything. And what's more than that, he built all these connections in the abundance of giving.
Whoa. Special. I relate to that in the sense that when I went through this Satori experience, I knew that I had to let go of my business. That was difficult. I'm the primary shareholder, majority owner, and have 2 other partners. And it happened when I was in the Satori one. I had a conversation with my business partner, Destiny, and the conversation went like this. This state of being, this is what I want to live for. And I know that it has nothing to do with running a marketing agency right now. And that was that full moment of realization. 6 months later, the conversation opened about leaving the company. And at first it was like, maybe I'll sell half my equity. And then it went to 100%, all of it. And in that journey of selling the equity of the company, it was such a complicated inner journey, because what's the equity worth? And people can tell you what the company's worth, and there's all these evaluations that different people can do, and it's this sense of, what am I worth? And I found myself constantly in these inner battles of, what is the number? Different people saying different things. I'm consulting with all these different people in my life that I fully trust to give me their honest feedback, and it's all over the place. It's all over the place. It's not like a nice little range. It's a wide range. I finally came to this moment where I said, I'm just going to fly to my partner, and I'm just going to tell her that I'm ready to leave, and that whatever the number is that she feels is fair, it's up to her to decide. And whatever amount of equity she wants me to sell, if it's all of it, amazing. And I went to her and shared this in absolute surrender and faith that whatever I was going to be given was going to be God's gift, and it was going to be perfect. Now, that was the most irrational and illogical thing anyone could have ever told me to do, but I did it, and it came out better than I could have ever imagined. And to this day, I reflect on that moment, because I was in a high level of consciousness at that time, and I think I'm in a lower state of consciousness now, but I'm a little bit more grounded. But it was a miracle to have that level of courage and faith in God to just go and say, here, my life is in your hands. Now you choose. I fully trust you that it'll be fair. The investors who came in and bought out the equity said they'd never seen anything like it. They'd never heard of anybody do anything like this. They couldn't even believe it. Thought it was like kind of a joke. And I've started Satori School. And originally when I created it, I created it as an LLC. And I thought, oh, this doesn't feel good. I don't want to do this. So I dissolved the LLC, and we're running as a nonprofit now, because I really don't want to have a container of greed where people come in and they have equity and they're thinking about profit for the shareholders. And what's so beautiful about nonprofits, there's no equity. All of the money has to go to the mission, and there has to be fair wages relative to whatever the IRS deems as fair for the given work that you're doing. Now, obviously, there's people that abuse the system and they pay themselves too much money, and they leverage the fact they don't have to pay tax. We're not going to do that, but it feels so good to be operating in this way where it feels like it's a full gift. And if somebody wants to give to Satori, it's a gift from their heart. We're not asking for it. Everything's free here. It's all free. You can listen to these conversations. You can tune in. And if it's helpful to you, great. If you feel like donating, you can. It reminds me of that, the story that you're sharing.
It's a beautiful beautiful intention that's revealed when you begin aligning all of your work in these ways. And that's, I think, probably one of the most interesting things about life and what you talk about, this irrationality, right, to other business people.
Right.
They're going, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I put a mural on the side of my house, and I bought this house because I rent out the top of it, and it's a business, right, in that sense. And it's cash flow positive. It's great. It meets all the criteria of a business. Everyone's like, oh, great, you're doing a great job there, which is what people think they need to tell you, and some people think they need to hear it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I put this mural on the side of my house because we're in the rhino neighborhood. So I have a rhino on the side of my house.
Okay.
And the same business people are like, that's stupid. That's a dumb investment. You're never going to see the ROI.
Yeah.
And the people that come to stay at that house love it.
Oh.
So it's insane to put a price tag on something like that, and yet we do that all the time.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between sex and love, right? You can buy a sexual encounter, but you can't buy love.
Wow.
Right? So they're nonsensical because they don't actually add up. They don't mix, and we try to mix them. Right, and I think nonprofits give us a chance to get a little closer, and B Corps are another way of understanding that and saying we're going to hold ourselves accountable. But ultimately, you could have a for-profit business that's doing amazing things because of its great leadership, right? And a nonprofit has a number of benefits, right? And so you might say, like we did the same thing with the game Gratitude that we built, because we thought, all right, this is an LLC, but where do we want to play? What are we doing? We want to improve connectivity between humans in an authentic way. That's going to happen really well through a nonprofit. And we get to work with people. It's a different conversation.
Very different.
And if you look at the history of capitalism, if you look at the history of LLCs, they're very unaccountable in their structure.
Yes.
And LLCs live forever, which is another really interesting thing about them. It's this entity that doesn't actually live, right? But we said it's born and it never dies. There's no expiration date on an LLC, and there's no responsibility, because you could close an LLC tomorrow and set up a new one, and the first one would be the one that owes the money, and the second one is just brand new and just appeared, and sort of this magic. And it's based in a lot of other power structures. So anyway, I think the fact that you showed up in your heart and people gave you advice, and then you're like listening, it's like there's a certain surrender to what you did. And I feel like it's an interesting game we play around saying, well, universe, I allow you to support me. It's like it's already doing that. Yeah. Right. We sit here on the earth. Why? Because of gravity. Because we're connected to it. And we could run around the whole time. Oh my God! What if we flew off this thing? What if gravity was gone tomorrow? And yet we're supported. Yeah. And so it's really up to me, and it's up to you, and it's to each of us to choose. Do we surrender to what's actually happening, or do we hold up this false world, which is that egoic place of thinking that we're in control, and then trying to defend that we're in control?
Yes. I find the magic of life only unfolds if you surrender. It only started for me when I started surrendering and letting go of these strong positionalities that I was holding on to that were heavily tied to my egoic identity around being an entrepreneur and having a business and making money and all this stuff.
Yeah. I think about The Secret just for a moment, because I know people will follow books and movies that are popular, and The Secret was popular, around this idea of manifesting. Yeah. Right. And it's an interesting moment when you shift your mind and you shift your heart and you shift your intention, that the world seems to shift around you.
Yes.
Even without going out. Now, I do believe there's action that's part of this.
100%.
We are embodied for a reason. Yeah. We're not just spirits, right? I think of us as spirits on a physical journey or a human journey. Yeah. But we're embodied for some purpose. We could sit on top of the mountaintop and just ohm all day. Yeah. Right? We could.
That would be beneficial.
And it might be very beneficial. Yeah. If you've spent 50 years of your life doing that, and that might still be your dharma. Maybe that's what your purpose in life is, to sit in that cave, and maybe you're influencing. I don't know if you're familiar. I'm sure you would be. What the Bleep Do We Know? They talked about a study in Washington, D.C., where there was a lot of crime over the summer. And they had this group come and meditate over the summer. And they were local to Washington, D.C., but some of them were not. Some of them were located around the world as part of this meditation. And they would just meditate about something specific at a specific time to bring peace to that area. And the police saw a reduction in crime. They saw a reduction in assaults.
Of course.
And so it's not it seems crazy to say, wait a minute, this is a non-physical thing that you're doing that has this other part. So it's, who are we? how can we influence the things around us, and getting away from, I think, that idea that we're only physical.
I love that. And what comes up to my mind is Gandhi and how he defeated the British colony.
Yes.
He
Right.
told people, don't hurt anybody. Just gather in peace and just stay calm. And when people did start retaliating, he's like, okay, I'm going to start killing myself slowly by fasting if you don't want to be in a peaceful protest. And then people really were like, whoa, okay, we love this man. Let's really unite. And it was so beautiful to see the power of peace manifesting against the most powerful colony at the time, so to speak.
Yeah.
Really beautiful example.
Yeah, that is a beautiful example. Sometimes we think we have to do something,
Right.
and yet there's a certain inaction, right? And not eating, and it was something that came to me, like why I chose to be silent at Burning Man. I've been talking my whole life.
Yeah.
I've had that experience. Let's try something different.
I love that you did that. It's something that I really feel called to do at some point. I've yet to go to Burning Man. I know it's going to be incredible when I do go. And I feel like when you were sharing that story at the beginning, we were talking about how when you first started meditating, you were kind of this like particle in a cube, like, rah! And you were probably just in your room in the most chill, calm environment.
Absolutely.
And the manifestation level up in your progression of consciousness is now you're at Burning Man. It's this chaotic environment,
Yeah.
but you're so calm and peaceful.
Yeah.
That's an incredible evolution.
It's an amazing shift, and I think what's interesting is I go deeper. I want to say that the universe has a plan for all of us, and that sounds like a bumper sticker, right? And it's not really meant to be that. But I think that part of the journey of being alive is to have that conversation with the universe,
Yeah.
right? To say it through experience, not just, hey, universe,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, you could be that person in the park talking to themselves, right? but ultimately, like, what does it want from me, and what is the feedback I'm getting, and does that feel like where I want to go, and sort of using that divining rod, if you will, to navigate through life based on what does feel like it's for my best, greatest, and for the people and animals and plants and everything around. It's curious to see from that place of stillness what happens when you walk into a room with animals. And I found that they'll come right up to you and just want to be next to you.
Yeah.
And other people want that peace. They want that love. They want that light. And the same reason that people followed Gandhi and wanted to get it closer. And people read the book, which is maybe a little glimpse into that Satori, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about the practice embodying it.
Yes. Let's play the game.
Oh,
And
let's go.
give me some context.
So I'll give you some context. So I wanted to share the experience of being silent from Burning Man. And so I actually came up with the whole speech, and I was like, I'll do a TED Talk. That's how I'll share this amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I would call it Burning Silence. I was like, okay, great title. This is perfect, amazing.
I like
And
that.
then I realized like TED is already starting to decline a little bit, and
Yeah.
people aren't watching it as often, and attention spans are shorter and shorter. And what's really happening here? There's this frenetic activity, not just at Burning Man, but in the whole world. And we call it like Burning Man has a certain kind of experience, and there's the default world, the sort of default operations, default modalities, default behaviors.
Yeah.
So I had an experience before 10 years of accelerated learning and experiential learning as a basis for, wow, we can use gameplay as a way to share information. And then whatever you have as your experience, playing a game is yours. It's unique to you.
Yeah.
And often the way you play a game is also the way you live your life. So it's not separate. And some people try to game the game, and ultimately, like, you're up against yourself. I'm up against me, So it's not like us competing against each other so much as realizing, whoa, I do that. Whoa. And so my intent was to share the experience through fun and play. And so Gratitude was born in that idea. And I shared that with a few friends who thought, you're going to Burning Man, you're silent? That's crazy. What are you doing? That's nuts. I'm like, well, all right, I'm still going to do it. So anyway, out of this was born cards with story prompts. And when I was there at Burning Man, I had a card in my pocket. It wasn't a spectacle like a sign around my neck, but if someone noticed I was silent, I handed them the card, and the card said, since I learned to speak, I haven't stopped. So I'm choosing for this week to be silent. And if there's something you might want to share, I promise I won't interrupt.
That's amazing. I was gonna ask you, how did you respond when people talk to you? That's brilliant.
That's how it went. And most people had the same kind of reaction you did, because we get interrupted a lot in life.
Yeah.
And so this was an invitation, and inside of each day I had one card that I would present as like the question, since I didn't have my voice to ask, and some people didn't know what to share. And other people really had something to share. It was on their heart, and they wanted to get it out. So I had these cards, and so as I thought about the cards, some of them were like good in the sense of great storytelling that would come out of someone.
Yeah.
And others were just like not that great. And so over time, I began to think, what are the questions we could be asking of each other? What are those intimate moments of our lives that we want to share, but maybe we don't get asked the question to share?
Yeah.
And so coupled with that, and then Hawkins, right? We were talking about it's a scale of consciousness. And so you have different emotions and you have time. And those kind of frame our stories, right? We have emotions and we have time frame. And so the time die has now and never and past and sometimes, those kind of things. And then the emotion die is the space die, right? These emotional spaces that we can be in are courage and joy, but also shame and regret. And then there's gratitude and there's love. And so you roll the dice, which get lodged into your subconscious mind and sit there waiting to be expressed.
Yeah.
And then you pull a card, and the card will bring up a memory. And so you share the memory and then look at the dice and see if they play well together.
Let's do it.
And then you have these other blue and red cards here, yeah? So the red ones are gratitude cards, which is just a way of saying thank you. At Burning Man, people will hug each other as a regular course of life, right? They don't know you've just met, and you get this big hug from someone, and it feels very authentic.
Yeah.
And that's a cool experience. It's like, how do you share that? So gratitude is a way to share that kind of love, and curiosity is a way to take the sharing a little deeper. So you might be like, oh, well, okay, you started down a route. Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And everything in the game is an invitation. So there's no like forced participation. If you want to play, cool. If you don't want to play, you don't have to. You want to go light? Go light. You want to go deep? Go deep. You choose. And then those cards can be passed to anyone. So you're playing with 5 people.
Okay.
And someone shares a curiosity, be like, dude, I was going to ask that question. So you give them a gratitude card. So it's just this way to kind of, the currency of the game is the cards in motion.
Okay.
So on your right is the game that we've collaborated with Deepak Chopra to release in November. Wow. Which is super fun. And a lot of it's inspired by his book, Abundance. So this is the game of abundance. And then on your left is the game of Gratitude, the OG, the original Gratitude. So these cards are inspired, and you see the QR in the back, and that relates to a character. And there are 8 characters in the game. So you'll see in front of you, listener, self-aware, inspirator, aficionado. These are all just kind of archetypes that we can embody through the gameplay. So there's the first round of sharing, and there's a second part of reflecting back. Like, hey, I saw you show up in this way, and you hand someone a card with that character at the bottom to reflect how you receive their play. And also you give one to yourself and ultimately say, well, I think I played this way. And other people are like, well, we think you played this way. And it might be the same, it might be a little different.
I love that. Let's do it.
So jump in. So I would say roll either of these.
Okay. I'm going to roll this big die.
Go with the big one.
Wisdom. And past.
Perfect. And then from whatever you choose, this is the deeper dive here, the Deepak.
So do I read this?
Go for it.
Story. It's no secret that life is dynamic. All of us are tossed around by change. What change do you invite or reject? Storyteller, one who adds extra color and context to their share. So tell me, what does this have to do with? Is that the archetype?
That's the archetype, yeah. So that comes into play a little bit later in the game, but can maybe guide a little bit how you might share.
Got it. Okay. What change do you invite or reject? The change that I invite is the change that brings me closer to God and further away, or less of that lowercase self, egoic self. So that would be the change that I would accept or invite. The change that I would reject would be the antithesis of that, which would be the change that would bring me further from God. I will say and add context to this, though. I feel like our levels of consciousness are always fluctuating, and I can sort of feel how right now my level of consciousness is lower than it was in certain periods of my life. And you could maybe say that if your level of consciousness is lower, you're a little bit further from God, even though you can't necessarily be far from God, but just for verbiage and speaking purposes, we'll define it as that. I feel like as we go through the scale of consciousness, the ups and downs are perfect and beautiful. And I feel that as we rise up and we get this glimpse of this magical, mystical level of consciousness, it's wow. And then you kind of have to come back down a little bit and reintegrate, and then you get higher highs and lower lows. And so I really embrace when these magical shifts happen. I just want to make sure higher highs and lower lows is always, or higher highs and higher lows is always so that's my answer.
I have a curiosity question for you here. This one I'll hand to you, and you can read it if you choose to answer.
Would you be willing to give or receive an outside perspective? Give or receive? Receive.
I experience you as somebody who seeks change and looks for those opportunities to learn and to go deeper. And I have a question for you around that, if you're willing.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it that you do to tune into who you are as you relate to the question of, like, is this the bigger S self or the small S self? And is this next thing, do I want to invite that change? What is your practice around, you mentioned like sometimes having higher consciousness or lower consciousness and wanting to shoot for higher highs of everything, right? Yeah. You don't want the lows to be super low, and maybe you want to just keep bringing that average up over time. So what is your way of doing that?
Well, I think that the most powerful weapon you can have in your toolbox for ensuring that you'll constantly average higher levels of consciousness is surrender, paired with the ability to tune into your heart and what feels amazing. Like, fuck, that feels so good. And I say those two things because you can surrender and sort of mix that up with passivity and become lethargic or reach a sort of plateau because you just sit there and do nothing all day. And I don't think that that's everybody's path. So I feel that if we can constantly surrender expectations, ideas of how things ought to be, we'll always be in this peaceful, loving presence and awareness. Now, it's difficult sometimes, and that's the work that we're doing when we're confronted with these lower vibrational emotions of anger or confusion or sadness, is to just let it pass through like a cloud in the sky. And I really like to see the human experience as one where it's sort of like where we are the sun, and there's clouds in the sky that can maybe block the sun and make us think, oh my God, where am I? But it's just a cloud, and it doesn't actually obstruct the sun in any way because we are the sun. And so if we can surrender when those clouds come through, we can more quickly dissolve the cloud. But I also feel that we need to be able to follow our heart. So I do my best in those two tools.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I really love what you said, that like we are the sun.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking, well, I've got to wait for the clouds to part to feel the sunshine on my face. It's like, oh, wait a minute. No, it's inside me. Yeah. I am the sun. And you might be the sun for someone else.
Right. Yes.
You might be that radiant light that they're noticing as an example of how they want to be, and gives them that inspiration. So thank you for sharing what you did.
That's a really beautiful question. Can I read this?
Yeah, go for it.
If a story personally resonates with you, feel free to give this card and briefly share your gratitude.
So I gave you that card because I'm grateful for what you shared.
Beautiful. Okay, that's what the cards are about.
Exactly, that's what the cards are about.
And are these like the points at the end of the game or something?
We'll see. Yeah.
Okay,
we'll see how the points come together.
Is it your turn to draw a card?
Okay,
or mine?
I'd go for, if you would draw a card for me, and I'll roll these dice.
Okay. I like the deep cards.
Deep deck. This is great. Okay, so my dice are courage and past. And the question is, who needs to be inspired and uplifted by you. And at the bottom, the character is inspirator, one who liberates a moment of inspiration. Who needs to be inspired and uplifted by you? I find that's a hard question to answer in the sense of maybe a traditional, like, one single person or a group of people. I don't have the sense that I'm responsible as a teacher for a group or any one person. I have the sense that I'm responsible to be tuned up to my consciousness as much as I can be, as much as I can bring in my awareness to consciousness and love.
Yeah.
And then to show up fully and be present.
Ah.
So I don't have a sense of like, oh, I'm a teacher. I really actually recoil at that. I don't
Me
like
too.
that at all. And I don't like the idea of being an inspirator. It feels like there's a lot of ego there. It might be true, right? If someone said, well, I feel that was very inspirational, that's inspiring to me. Great, cool. I'm the messenger, not the message. And so my job is to sort of stay tuned into the message of love for me. And then if I'm doing that and someone's inspired, well, cool. They're inspired by something that's the source of that, and the source is within them.
Ah, that was so special. Wow. This is where I give you a gratitude card.
Thank you.
That was so great.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I really, really, really love that. And I feel that awareness, what you just described, is so beautiful. And I pray that anyone who listens to this has the opportunity to subjectively experience that and know it to be true fully. And I feel I was once somebody who objectively understood that. I read a lot of Hawkins books before I had my Satori moment, and I kind of had that awareness, like, okay, that sounds true, but it was a logical, objective understanding. But after subjectively feeling that to be true, it takes away all this pressure, because all of these costumes or identities or different things that we can hold, being the inspirator, being the teacher, it's all something that just spontaneously flows through the vessel. And if you try to hang on to the costume, even for just a moment, you kind of lost it, because you're then trying to force that role and play that role. And I find that it's so beautiful when we surrender and just let any archetype come through us that God wants us to play in any single moment. That is when it's like we're just that infinite dice that we have no idea what's going to be rolled. It's just so contextual to the being that walks up, the question that gets asked, the moment. It's really special.
I love what you're describing, and it feels like that non-attachment to the outcome. And I have this sense that when we talk about embodiment, there are these energies around us that want to come into being, and that can come in a lot of different forms, right? Mm-hmm. What you're doing with education is an inspiration that you've come to run with. You are a vessel, your nonprofit is a vessel, the people you work with ultimately are a vessel of that energy pouring through them, and it wants to come into being.
Yeah.
And if you look at an invention like the printing press, there's a time and a place and a gestation. There's sort of like seeds that have been planted by the universe. And in some cases, those seeds are planted at the same time in multiple places. We go, wow, that's interesting. How this idea, like without a telegram or the internet, that these times in history, like how do they become, how do they come into play? So it's up to us. Right? You have an idea, and if you don't run with that, I mean, what happens? Does that idea die? This is kind of like the Buckminster Fuller question about a chain of events.
Yeah.
So there's a chain of events happening. You represent a miracle of a chain of events, and so do I. We're here because of life itself, right? We're possible because all of those things conspired to work out in this chain of events. It's unbroken because we're here.
Yeah.
So that's extraordinary. And what other things want to be born through us, and how can be aware and awake to whatever it is that we're feeling called to do. And I think that's the only thing we're here to do. And there's a surrender to that.
Yes.
What is it that wants to be born? I see myself as a conduit. Like this game wanted to be born, but there are other games out there. There are other conversation starter games, and there are relationship games. Yeah. Why this one? Well, this one's my unique take on all the different waterfall of events that brought me to this moment. Yeah. So I could sit there and fight it, and there are times where I'm very stubborn. My little s self gets in the way, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. It's like, what's in your way? I remember one of my favorite, Stan Lee, the Marvel comic.
Yes.
So,
creator of Spider-Man.
Yeah, creator of Spider-Man, exactly.
And many others.
And he's no longer with us in mortal form anymore.
Yeah.
But he ran for a while on Sci-Fi Channel, this reality TV series. When everyone was getting this reality TV, like, oh, Sci-Fi Channel, let's go. It's been unreal for a while. Let's go for real.
Yeah.
And so they had these contestants, and I believe there were 4, and they all had to have a costume and a superpower. And they're like, okay, here's my superpower. And they're all kind of buff people, except one kind of bigger black lady. And it's just such a setup, the whole thing. You're like, wow, okay, what's going on here, right? Mm-hmm. And so in each challenge, there were very physical challenges, and she wasn't performing very well. And one of them, it was like a race from one side, and you get over this wall, and you have to do this, and she just wasn't adept for it. So she's running across this plaza, and in each of the runs that they had all done, it was the same conditions, okay? But she was moving at a pace where she was noticing what was happening around her. In the background was a man with a shopping cart who toppled his shopping cart and fell. Nobody else noticed because they were moving so fast from A to B, or A to B to C to D, whatever the linear path was. And she looked over and she saw this person, and she stopped to help him.
Oh. And
then she, was crying at the end when they announced her time. And she says, "Look, I know I'm not very good at this. I don't know. I don't know what my superpower is." And Stan Lee says, "No, that's what superheroes do. Superheroes stop to take care of others."
Oh, me. That's so beautiful. It reminds me of something Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. He said that, Arjuna, those who do not serve in this world are without a home in this world and in any world to come. And it's this realization that if we're not serving people, and if we're not unconditionally loving and selflessly giving, we'll never find home.
I think that's true. I think we could be tortured souls going through this thinking it's about us and it's about our fulfillment in a hedonic sense, right?
Yes.
Hedonism.
Yes.
And it's very easy to see there are people with lots of money and that's all they have. And that's what Bob Marley said. He said some people are so poor all they have is money.
That's amazing. I've never heard that. Wow.
And it is about service. I think, but here's the thing. Some people think that we need a moral code. And I don't disagree that that's useful for the world. I'm not saying we shouldn't write down laws or that the 10 Commandments aren't useful.
Yeah.
But I think there's a certain inflection point when you realize that these things prove themselves. And David Hawking, he talks about how when you are around a certain energy, you can feel whether it supports life or it doesn't. That's the heuristic. That's the test.
Yep.
And so if you have vitamin C at your solar plexus and you put your arm out, and you can use applied kinesiology to test this, your arm will stay strong. But if you put NutraSweet in that same envelope, even if you, the conscious mind doesn't know what's in that envelope, your arm will stay strong or go weak based on whether it supports life, is that question. And so as we go through life, I think that we can feel it.
Yeah.
And the people that ignore it, ultimately, you can't. At some level, if you're not doing what your soul calls you to do or what you feel is right. And that's, I think that's the only job we have to do, is to continue to develop that sense and attempt as best we can. So my version of what I think integrity is to listen to that voice as best we can and attempt to bring our actions into parity with what we feel to be true.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Something that also comes up with me based on what you just said, and I think this comes from Hawkins, I'm not exactly sure, but we shouldn't fear action as long as our intentions are pure and loving. And that's the most beautiful thing in the world, because it doesn't matter what we do. If our intention is to be of selfless love and service to mankind, even if we make some mistakes along the way, it's the intention that the karma is tied to. And I feel that is so, so, so beautiful. Now, there's a fine line. You can obviously say, oh, my intention was this, and it's totally not. So it's very subjective, and you know within whether or not your intention was pure and loving. But I love what you shared.
Do you want to pull another card?
I was just about to say. You were blocked from getting what you wanted. What happened?
You got to roll the dice, too. What'd you get in the dice?
Desire.
How perfect is that?
Never.
How do the dice know?
Wait. Where is my card? Here it is. You were blocked from getting what you wanted. What happened? Tell me, how does the never die tie into this?
Yeah, exactly. How does it tie into this?
I'm a little bit confused.
We'll come back to it. So
Okay.
start with the card, and I'll if it doesn't show up, I'll share an idea.
You were blocked from getting what you wanted. What happened? Wow. Well, in business, I really wanted to make an absurd amount of cash. I think the goal for a long time was about $1 million a month. And I would say the margins on that was ideally 30, 40% or something in that range. So hundreds of thousands of dollars profit per month. It never manifested in my career to that scale. We did reach beautiful levels of business that I'm very grateful for. But it was always an uphill battle. And what happened and what unfolded was sort of reaching this point of surrender and knowing that, wait, I'm sitting on enough for the rest of my life. Why do I need tens of millions of dollars? That's absurd. And so through just relentlessly pursuing something that was absolutely ridiculous, I burned myself out to the point of realizing that I needed to surrender and embrace a new way of living that involved not spending a ridiculous amount of money every single month, but living below my means and coming to a place of wholeness and acceptance and love and gratitude for the simple things in life that don't cost a lot of money. That was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it is not fun living above your means. And it doesn't feel good. It gives you anxiety. It doesn't matter how much money you're making. It just does not feel good. And I was sick a lot. I was burning out a lot. So I'm really grateful that I never actually reached that level of business, because had I reached it, I don't know if I would have gotten out. Because I think the deeper you go, the harder it gets and the tighter the chains become.
I love what you shared, and I have a curiosity. It's on here. It says, would you be willing to share more and or deeper? And I have a specific question if you'd be willing to answer my specific question.
Cool. You can just draw this curiosity
draw
card
them
and go
out and
deeper?
go deeper.
This is cool. Oh my God.
As I hear you, I realize so many people have sort of set a context around what is enough money.
Yes.
And my curiosity, my question for you is, how did you decide on $1 million a month? What do you think was at the root of that? What was driving that need for so much money, and just you said an enormous amount of money? What was that need?
Oh, it was 100% derived out of insecurity. I wouldn't have said that at the time because my walls were so thick and the ego was so big. But my idol when I was a kid was Dan Bilzerian. You know him?
I do.
Okay. If you don't know who he is, you can Google him on Instagram and you'll know very quickly what his lifestyle is all about. Hedonistic.
Very much so.
The best
Lawsuits against
example.
him and huge parties. And I think he threw a girl off a roof and she broke her foot. And
Tons of
just
absurd stuff.
absurd things.
Yes. Private jets, mansions, all the cars. Very materialistic, hedonistic. The question was, how did I realize it was enough? Oh, what was driving that number? Yeah, so there was just a sense that, well, if I can become that, I know that I've found success in life. That was my idea of what success was. You can buy anything you want. You can go anywhere you want. You have ultimate freedom. Everybody wants to be with you because you have everything in the world that the world has to offer. So I didn't know that there was another realm beyond physicality. I was truly a walking blue pill in the Matrix that was just an NPC, kind of like hitting the wall of materialism, thinking, well, this is all there is. This is all there is.
What
this
a beautiful
is all
visual.
there is. And then one day somebody, my girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend in Panama, she's going to AA, not because she was an alcoholic for other reasons, but the group was powerful, and she had an addiction that she wanted to transcend, and that was just a group that really helped her. There was a man in that group, and he just was such a ball of love and light, and she always spoke about him when she came home. This man, like, wow, you have to meet him. Anyways, I ignored her for months. Finally, she kind of got to me. She said, he's a billionaire. Oh, whoa, he's a billionaire? And he's in AA? Like, that doesn't add up. Doesn't make any sense. And so she said, you have to meet him. Go meet him. Okay, I'm going to meet him. So I find out he lives 3 buildings away from me. And he's in his penthouse. So I'm like, wow, this is the real deal. What the fuck, man? Am I about to meet a billionaire? So I'm so excited. I'm like 21, 22 years old. I'm full set on Dan Blazarian North Star lifestyle. It's my Polaris star. And I've never met this man. I knock on the door, and it's the most welcoming and warming presence. You actually kind of physically look like him also, and I feel a similar energy from you guys, so similar. I just felt, wow, this is incredible. He opens the door, nice to meet you, gives me a hug. I think I was holding out my hand or something. Awkward. I was so self-conscious and awkward and insecure. I was like, nice to meet you. Like, but like so excited at the same time.
Yeah.
And he let's go to the rooftop, hang out. He gets me a Zevia, like root beer or something. We crack the cans open, and I'm like, so I just have to ask you this because my girlfriend told me that you're a billionaire. I'm like, wow, what the fuck, man? That's incredible. Like, how did you get here? And he just like goes like this and starts laughing. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, bro, I'm not a billionaire. Yes, I've made a lot of money in this life, but I'm not a billionaire. And then he said, have you ever researched consciousness? And I thought, where the fuck is this going? What is he talking about? So I was like, researched consciousness? I can't even tell you what that means. He said, well, you should check out Dr. David R. Hawkins. And you should see his work. Mm-hmm. I think you should read those books. That would be really helpful. And so I'm on Amazon as he's telling me this. I order Power versus Force, which is the first book by Hawkins. And then he says, I want to show you something. He shows me this video. And it's a video of Hawkins. And it's a 4-minute video. He's talking about the final door. Have you seen this video?
No.
Oh, I'm going to show you it.
Okay.
We're going to play it. Incredible. It's essentially a video explaining his subjective experience of going all the way and reaching the final door, which is 1,000 on the scale. It blew my mind. I had never seen anything like it, heard anything like it. It's this old man who looks like he's in his final 2 years of life, and he's saying this in such a mystical, he's like a wizard from The Hobbit or something. Who is this man? I couldn't believe that all we talked about was nothing related to business. But I walked away feeling incredible. Mm-hmm. So I read Power versus Force and then immediately bought the whole trilogy of his 13 books, and that radically transformed my life. And it was in that moment where my North Star shifted to enlightenment. And it was so funny because I was such a like young, kind of naive kid, like, it's not about business anymore. It's about enlightenment. Like, wow. And then was born the spiritual ego. And I was in a whole new realm of the Matrix. And I was like banging my head against the enlightenment door. Like, okay, this is the goal. This is the goal. I'm very fortunate to have come to the realization that there is no goal and that it isn't something that you can achieve or obtain. And that it's just always within you.
Right.
And so that answers your deepening.
That's beautiful. Love that. I really appreciate you.
I'm so glad you pulled that card.
That's gorgeous, man. Thanks for sharing that. That's really good. Yeah. I'm reminded as you were talking about this quote that says, you can't get enough of what you don't really need.
Yes. Whoa. You can't get enough of what you don't really need. Greed. Wow.
And this idea, like your North Star, great, so well said. Like
Thank
this
you.
North Star of business and this North Star of this, and it's like we're using it's funny because if you were to say the North Star and someone looks up at the sky,
Yeah.
there are lots of lights out in the sky. Right? So that North Star could be, anybody could choose any star to navigate towards. And yet the one that's saying, oh, this is the North Star.
Yeah,
This is how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Where is there?
Where is there?
Right.
Yeah.
And so this idea of context, right? Is today a good day or a bad day? We'll ask 100 people.
Yeah.
You'll get a different answer from each person, likely.
Yes.
And they'll give you their reasons. And everyone's right by their reason. Everyone's right by the stars they're maybe navigating with. And so it's funny that we give context to the world.
Right.
And it is a conversation. This is very like a Taoist kind of thing, right? Because in one way, we have this paradox of being alive and dying at the same time. And we have the sense of having great meaning, yet meaninglessness. And well, if it's all context, well, then where's the context come from? So it's a funny thing to walk that middle path, or the Wu Wei in Taoism. Are you familiar with Wu Wei?
No.
So basically on one side, if you imagine an instrument, you have a string that's unstrung.
Yeah.
It won't make any sound, won't make music. And if it's strung too tightly on the instrument, it'll snap.
Yes.
So what is that vibration? What is that frequency? What is that melody? What is that harmony? That's the middle path, is where the music lives.
Whoa, I'm seeing the line between the yin yang. Yeah. Beautiful. Wasn't that Buddha's awakening? He was sitting under the Bodhi tree and someone was tuning an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, I believe that is how it happened.
Yeah.
And he came to the realization that, whoa.
Yeah.
It's right in that fine, centered, balanced, beautiful place. Not too far that way, not too far that way.
Yeah. And one of my mentors, his name is Marshall Thurber. He's a business mentor and a friend. And he had a course for 30 years called Money and You. And people would come for the money and find out it was all about them. Very much to what you just described. And he said, but if you called it It's All About You, no one would show up. And if they did, they wouldn't have any money.
Wait, that's so funny.
So he had that, and one of his things was like, all right, here's where you are, and here's your goal. Okay, so you get to your goal. Let's say you get to your goal, and you get to that. Let's say it's $1 million a month.
Yeah.
And you get to that goal. Well, can that be your goal anymore?
Right.
It can't, because you're already there, right?
Yeah.
So you have to set a new goal.
Yeah.
And you have to set a new goal and set a new goal. And so life is about motion and being in motion.
Yeah.
And this isn't it. Every
Right.
time you arrive, this isn't it.
Yeah.
So he says, this isn't it, is it?
Yeah.
It's the never
love
arriving.
that.
It's the journey.
Infinite.
Yeah. It's being on that journey of love.
Oh, I love that. And it's such a fine line, because I would tell you that right now, I don't necessarily have a goal or a North Star, but I have a way of being. And that could be seen as a goal, but it's not like that. Like when we launched Satori, there was no expectations. There was no, I want to get this many listeners by this date. There wasn't even a launch plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we're going to just unfold naturally from our heart's calling. Do some episodes, release them, edit them to the best of our ability, make it the highest quality that we can, and show up in the best way to give the best of the experience that we can possibly give with the resources that we have.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the goal is to guide humanity back to inner peace. But there's no attachment to that goal. And that's the fine line of, you can have these goals or these things that you want to do, these intentions. You just can't become attached to the outcome of them. And I love, love, love that journey. It feels so much better, because in the business world where I came from, we're doing QBRs, we're doing weekly stand-ups,
Yep.
we're doing annual reviews, and it's all about the bar and the graph and why is it not going up faster than we want it to go up. So glad to let that go.
Yeah, I hear that. I think of intention and goal and this question of, in one business sense, it's about mindset. Focus on the goal. Focus on the next chart, next quarterly earning, next month. What are we doing? What was that? And there's a lot of stress in that. There's a lot of trying to carry this thing up, that rock up the hill, so to speak. And ultimately, by what method? By what method do we measure our success? And we played this game when we had the prototype available for Deepak for the very first time. And there was this really beautiful moment where he hadn't seen the full game in effect yet, and we had started playing it at dinner. He invited us to this like little Indian restaurant, which was a no big deal kind of Indian restaurant, except the food was really good. So you wouldn't look at it from the outside.
Wow, I
It
love
was
that.
kind of diamond in the rough thing.
Yeah.
So we get into this place, and it was surreal. I'm like, we're having dinner with Deepak Chopra. Right? it was a great moment. And so we had just a group of like 6 of us, and one of the ladies there had opened up the box, pulled a card, rolled the dice, and was just thrilled with it, loved playing it. And Deepak was having a conversation on the other side of the table, and so at some point looked over and said, "What is that?" She says, "Deepak, it's your game. You should come play it." So he does. He pulls, he rolls the dice, pulls a card, and his dice were joy and now.
Oh, wow.
Right. You
Of
can't script these things. And I'm like, yeah, of course it is. Like, can you imagine if you got shame always? Like, this will be fun. We got Deepak, shame always. And his card was describe success and invite each person playing to offer one sentence of what success means to them.
Whoa.
And so he said that joy is the only measure of success. And to be joyful, you must be present.
Oh.
Right now. Just go, drop the mic. So that's the context then. If you can be joyful, right, truly joyful, not pretending or the subjective. Like, I mean, at some level, it's all subjective to you.
For sure.
Your personality. But ultimately, if I can come into closer communion through meditation is one of my ways. But life is not just the 10 minutes you meditate at night. It's what is the life that you live. Are you in this walking meditation of being with others? And can you bring, you ever watch Sadhguru?
Yes.
Really, really appreciate Sadhguru. And every time he's asked a question, he starts to laugh just at front because he just realized like he doesn't have an answer, but he'll share whatever wisdom he thinks might be useful.
Yeah.
And it seems to be good because he's got a huge following.
Yeah.
But this idea of just, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have an answer for this. And what if there isn't a purpose for you? Well, then, how can you be a little bit more joyful every day? And so he said, that's it. His goal, if you will, we'll come back to goal and intention, is to be more joyful every day, which really pissed off my logical mind. Because if you're on let's just take the business approach and a chart. Yeah. And you've got, okay, I'm at 80% joy. Yeah. Right? We really got to get to 100%. Oh, man. But if we do like 90%, if we get to 90%, well, shoot. And then like, what if we get to 99 and then we have 1 more percent? What if we get that 1 more percent? Then we'll be at joy. And then how do we get more joy the next day? We'll always be chasing joy. Yeah. And so this idea of being in joy and that joy is infinite. And so if we allow for that idea, if we allow that joy is infinite, then we can have a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace each day, and that sort of upward trajectory you described earlier of chasing the higher high and maybe the low is a little higher than the previous low, then we can, that's a beautiful goal. So
I love that.
It's a little bit vexing to one side of me and really, really satisfying to the other, and that's part of that paradox.
I'll give you a gratitude card.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pick a card for you.
Oh, that'd be great.
We haven't done one from this deck. Let's do one.
Where do you want to go? That'll be the perfect card. What you got? Go ahead, read it.
Okay, this one's for you. If you could hear I love you from someone, from whom would it be most meaningful?
I'm going to roll these dice. That looks like it's not quite on the side. Which one do you see?
I'm seeing wisdom.
Okay, let's go with wisdom and past. That's what you had last time. So wisdom, past. Love you from anyone. Once upon a time, I would have said my grandma. But I will say that the most meaningful I love you, and I'll take a moment to try to explain this because I think it's tricky, is from myself. Yeah. And people talk, my business partner and I, Terry, we talk about this question all the time because it gets to be this kind of life coach conversation. If you got to love yourself, you got to start with love. Love yourself, love yourself, love yourself. And that can be very selfish. Yeah. You might decide that, I just got to love myself and I don't have any room for anyone else because I've just got to love myself. And that might be true for you. I'm not here to argue or be contentious with anyone. And yet I think that there's already so much love. It's that surrender and acceptance. Yeah. Right? and yet there's a perfectionist side to me. Or there's a T-shirt that says I'm a perfectionist, but I'm working on it. Just to get trapped in the perfectionism a little bit more. So I feel that when I do something, I think, oh, did I do that well enough? Did I do that? Yeah. And then when I'm really in my heart and when I'm present with people, there's no score to that.
Yeah.
It's just presence. It's enough. Being there in love is enough. And so that's the reminder, is not so much telling myself I love you, but to remind myself how important it is to be in that loving moment.
Oh, you got it. You might want to twist the leg so it's parallel with the leg. There you go. Being in that loving moment, reminding yourself. Was that the end of it?
That's it. So that's meaningful to me, to stay in love.
Yeah.
And that's the practice for me is meditation. The practice is to keep showing up, keep bringing that awareness, and then doing my very best to look for the light in people's eyes when I meet them.
I have a curiosity card that I want to hand to you.
Okay.
So, would you be willing to give or receive an outside perspective? Is this where I get to ask you something more deeper about what you were sharing?
Sure, go for it.
Yep. Okay. Do I give it to you?
Absolutely. Set that over here.
Why is meditation so powerful?
For me, meditation is a place where being and doing come into the same space. Where I'm taking the doingness of my conscious activity, right? So I'm consciously choosing to set up my meditation seat. I'm getting charged up. There's a whole, if you follow SRF, the Self-Realization Fellowship, and the Paramahansa Yogananda method of meditation, it's about energization first. So especially because I'm doing this before I go to bed, I'm not doing this to fall asleep. I'm coming into it with conscious awareness that I'm charging up. So I'm actually physically charging up my body and then becoming like a little lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Right? That's my job. My conscious job is to show up and do those things to get into that space. And the beingness is what is a result of sitting. And being with that moment is a choice. So I'm bringing conscious awareness into a moment that I allow myself to come into that calm and still and well-being and silence.
Whoa. It's the full yin-yang. Super cool. I love that description. And the benefits of that are that you have greater levels of presence throughout your day when you charge up in that way. Is you sort of walk away from it in that state. You wake up feeling in that state. You kind of you become the walking embodiment of that through your day.
It's a little bit like having breakfast or lunch or dinner, right? You're doing that because you know there's an energetic benefit to you, that if you didn't eat, you would die at some point, unless you're a breatharian, and we're not going to get into that.
I've never heard of
There's
that.
Blizzarians and then there are breatharians. Breatharian is literally breathe air in.
Yes. Prana.
Yeah. So it's just consuming prana. I would love to be at that level, but I actually find that I eat a lot.
I love meat.
I wish I didn't love meat so much. Yes, I found that helps me survive. So there's that conscious choice to put something in your body, and then there's this autonomous process by which, like, I'm not thinking about, well, I've got to divide this to make this, and like the aminos have to go over here, and the protein, like that's happening on this autonomous level, which is really, really pretty amazing. And so in a way, meditation's like that. It's a choice to drink the nectar of the universe for that charge up, right? You might say, well, I drink caffeine. That's where I get my charge up. And cool, caffeine has a certain energetic pattern to it. Yeah. And yet it's an external thing to get a certain result. And the most beautiful thing to me about meditation and consciousness and awareness is that that's a choice. I'm bringing this into my body as my mind, my body, my experience, my spirit, and then I'm getting a result that is from me in cooperation with it. Not just like I take this pill and it does this thing. It's like, if you look at the placebo effect, for example, it's extraordinary what our minds are capable of without ever taking that pill. It's sugar water, right? Or it's a sugar pill. And you take it in and you go, wow. And so the research on that's really extraordinary of how powerful we are. So maybe I get to that place someday when I don't need a meal, a physical meal. But, in moderation, it does bring me energy, and it feels right.
Speaking on placebo, there's actually a mini documentary BBC did oddly enough, on the placebo effect, and it was incredible. They took osteoporosis. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a knee doctor.
Okay.
Do you know that?
Osteopath?
That might be what it is. Somebody who works on knee surgery specifically. And this doctor, for whatever reason, had permission to be able to do these knee surgeries, half placebo, where he never actually did it, and half actual surgeries. Now, these are serious surgeries. He's cutting the knee open. He's moving around different things. And
MCL, ACL, kind of
something
necessary.
It's serious. Yeah. And so what he did with the placebo effect is he on the screen where there is the showing the inside of the knee in like the black and white to show where the bones are, whatever. He played a recording as if he was doing the surgery that he's done a million times. He brought in all the assistants and people as if they're doing the surgery. They cut the knee open, and then they pretended to do the movements that they were going to do to fix the knee.
Wow.
Okay, this is for about 50 patients, or 30 patients, if I remember correctly. Then they sealed it up, and it looked like the surgery happened. 70% of the people that had that placebo surgery, perfect.
Wow.
Perfectly fine.
Wow.
When he went back and did the interview with them to tell them, I think it was months later or something.
Like, don't tell them, they're doing great.
Nobody believed him.
Wow.
It was these old folks, and the interviews are incredible. There's no way.
Wow.
There's no way.
Huh.
It was the most beautiful part, like showcase of the effect of the placebo that I've ever seen. It blew my mind.
And the other 30% were like, this sucks. I can't believe it. It's just people lying to me.
You know, it's also beautiful, and it comes up to me. Have you ever read Raw?
No.
Okay, so The Law of One is an incredible series that was channeled by, I don't remember her name, it was a group of beings. They're kind of like scientists, and they felt that there had to be a greater source of information that was more reliable, and so they decided to channel into the universe and hope that some voice would come through, and a voice did come through, and it was a species called Ra. They helped build the pyramids, and when you read the book, it's incredible. It correlates with a lot of some of the wisdom I've pulled from Hawkins and the Bhagavad Gita and different places. So you would find joy in reading it. But the point is that they said there is a lot of guilt and shame that comes from doctors on planet Earth who perform a surgery and it doesn't work out. And what would be so beneficial for these doctors and for the doctors to realize is that they are not responsible for the outcome. They are responsible for giving the opportunity for an outcome. And that was so interesting and so powerful because I feel that there are some people who go through the surgeries, it never works out, because they're in this place of doubt, or they're in this place of guilt or shame or fear or whatever it is, and they can't come out of it, and it is not helpful to their healing process, that they are in these lower vibrational emotions. Then there's other people who they just say, I don't want to do the chemotherapy. I'm just going to watch comedies all day and pretend that golden sparkles are falling into my body and they're healing my cancer, and they're fine. Everybody's journey is different, but I thought that was beautiful that it's sort of like you can't just expect the outcome to be perfect because the person's a professional doctor. You have to almost manifest it for yourself through prayer and intention and allowing yourself to come into these higher vibrational emotions.
This is where the podcast gets juicy.
Okay.
I think what you just said is so true. That we, in a way, we are the prisoner and the guard, right? We've imprisoned ourselves, and it kind of back to that paradox, the Taoist kind of paradox, and where I think people get really. Maybe the question that's in a listener's mind right now is like, what about the bad stuff?
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, this person was raped, or that person was, run over by a drunk driver, or whatever tragedy. Name the tragedy. And a lot of movies work like this, right? You start with the tragedy, and then the rest of the movie is a justification for getting even or finding justice, whatever. We'll try to use the word justice, even though it's often not
revenge.
What would be considered just. It's revenge. And it's also with a lot of violence, right? So look at most movies. There's something terrible that happens for 5 minutes, and then there's
Batman.
2 hours of, Batman's a great example, right? And the rest of his entire life and existence is towards this thing, like, there's this whole empire set up on this 1 5-minute sequence, which, look, we all have something like that.
Yeah.
So there is pain. And someone might say, well, then, okay, cool, you got pain, but then you're saying there's just love? How do you reconcile love and pain? So before I give how I might answer that. I would be curious to hear how you would respond to somebody who's feeling a lot of pain, who has like this justifiable position around something they call bad, and then how do you infuse that, or how do you bring love into that?
It's such an incredible question. I've contemplated this paradox so many times. I believe that there's some context that needs to be put on the table to really answer that question. And one of them is karma. So karma is the sense that if you are to do something negative or positive to someone, you will reap what you sow karmically, either at some point in your life or in a future life. So if I kill somebody, I should be expected to be killed in another life, or some tragedy should fall upon me. I believe very strongly that we reincarnate many, 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 many times. And so there are certain things that we've done through various different lifetimes that if we look at it from the grand cosmic perspective, we can see that it's perfect. But we can't, because we're in this human vessel, and our minds can't comprehend the infinite nature of all that is, and how we've come to this moment sitting here, or how come the baby dies at 2 years old and it hasn't done anything wrong, but it died of cancer, or the child goes through cancer for its whole life, and it's insane, it's treacherous, it's terrible. Well, I believe that we choose to come here. And so if you put that on the table and you can accept that as true, then you have chosen this experience, and you've chosen to transcend this pain and this suffering, because it's very likely that you did this to somebody in a past life. So anytime something happens, I broke a rib recently, I was just like, wow, I feel that. Amen. I'm not mad. I'm not angry. I know that there was some point in time where this is just karmically perfect and I'm supposed to be experiencing this. Or I was so sick for weeks at one time, and the whole time I was just surrendering to God, knowing that this is something I have to go through, and I need to face it because it's perfect. So, yeah, it's difficult to accept that murder and rape and all the different horrors and war, it's terrible. It sucks. I would prefer to live in the heavenly domain where we're all living in peace. That's why Satori School is here, to help bring people to peace. But we also have to recognize that in this purgatorial domain, which I say this word a lot, and there's a lot of confusion on what it is, but in the Catholic Church, they say that this is a purgatorial place. We come here to cleanse our souls of sin. Sin to me is just spiritual error. And so that could be seen as karma, negative karma that we've accumulated through many lifetimes. And so if we recognize that we're in a purgatorial domain where hell and heaven exist, in the sense that we can absolutely feel the worst suffering of all time and the most godlike, heavenly, miraculous feelings of all time, we can recognize that this is such an incredible place for us to evolve as souls. Because if we were in a heavenly domain, there wouldn't be that much opportunity for us to transcend negative karma. We've sort of chosen an easy life, so to speak, or a hedonistic life in some realm. And I'm sure you could probably choose that or go there. But you won't actually be able to evolve and have that maximum karmic opportunity to transcend these painful things or these things that you've accumulated over time. So that's the stance I take, and it's a tough one for people to accept, especially because so many people don't believe in past lives or they don't understand karma. And it's difficult to prove. It's just something you kind of have to look at all the various different experiences of your life and think, yeah, that thing is definitely with us. And this is all a beautiful karmic unfoldment that is underlyingly perfect anywhere you look. I'm so curious to see how you answer this question too.
I love how you answered it. And I think we have a similar viewpoint. So there's definitely a confirmation bias in this room.
Okay.
So to speak, this room. But to say that, to announce the context up front is important. Because I think that's good to recognize that, yes, past lives, future lives, dharma and karma, and to understand, like, even the frame of positive and negative, or a frame like heaven, purgatory, and then there's a concept of hell that is all part of that as well. I think of it a little bit like a parent and a child. And I think I go back to like the ACIM, the Course in Miracles. And you as a child may not feel your dad's love or your mom's love. right? And you could be justified. Well, I didn't get the truck I wanted for my birthday. I was at this toy truck I really, really wanted. My dad didn't get me the truck I wanted. He got me the cheap one. I wanted the other one.
Yeah.
And so you as the kid, you can, even though that valve is on love, right? It's just flowing. You may be like, I opt out. I don't want to be in this tub of love. Forget it. I'm not feeling the love. So I unsubscribe to that channel. And that's part of the choice that we have. I think that's what's unique about us as opposed to maybe other beings. I can't speak for that. People are like, well, dogs have souls too. I'm like, okay, let's not. Okay, let's just. But as far as like what seems to be unique about humans is we have a specific kind of choice. We can get out of that flow and say, I don't want to be in that anymore. I don't feel the love. And yet the parent could be like, all I do is want to shower my child with love.
Yeah.
And then with the dharma and the karma come into that same kind of analogy is that the parent might be trying to hold back on the most expensive truck, thinking, well, maybe a little austerity would teach that child better in the world.
Yes.
Not as a punishment, but just sort of as a point of being in the world and not expecting, right, whatever it is. And that could be coming from how they were raised and how they're. So there's a chain of events that's coming down from our ancestors into that moment. Some of it's chemical too, right?
Yeah.
Your brain makeup, your intelligence, some of these things like your DNA, like some of that's pre-programmed into the moment. So you don't have free will about whether or not you're in this physical form with your blue eyes, right?
Yeah.
You didn't get to choose that. Or maybe you did if it was a soul choice at a higher level. And I also, when you talked about thinking of choosing this life, I think we check the box without fully knowing. And I think we sort of agree to like, hey, there's a not knowing that's part of this experience. It's like you could get on a roller coaster and be like, oh, I'm getting on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And the person's like, well, there are going to be ups and downs. You're like, yeah, I know there are going to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
But you don't really know.
You don't know. Yeah.
There are going to be ups and downs and twists and turns. And like, there's going to be a moment where you're like really scared and you don't know that stuff.
Yeah.
You're signing up for a certain kind of ride.
Yes.
So I think we're very aligned in the way that we see that. And I would say there was one thing you said about heaven and purgatory and hell, and heaven is sort of a funny description. It's kind of like aliens. Aliens and heaven have a similarity because when we see aliens in history and culture, they're basically us with a little bit bigger eyes, pointier chins, bigger heads, advanced. Like their technology's better, their civilization is either totally destroyed or doing really well. Like one or the other. Right? And so it's a conception that we just come up with. It's like, well, they must just be better. And that's what heaven is. Heaven just must be better.
Right.
But honestly, heaven sounds pretty boring. Like if you told me you're just going to go and everything's kind of perfect, I'm like, well, wait a minute. And maybe because I only know this experience, I wouldn't choose that. But I would say that this is heaven.
Yeah.
And every moment that I'm here, I get to choose. Is this going to be my hell?
Yeah.
Am I between choices? Is that my purgatory I haven't chosen yet and I'm kind of stuck in that purgatory? Or is this heaven? I'm feeling the love and I'm choosing to be in that feeling of love and well-being.
Right. I fully agree. I mean, that's my perspective as well, is that we come in and there's actually a really good video by a being, really incredible. I'm going to try to find it. I forget his name. I'll put it in the show notes in the description, but he is a soul who remembered his incarnation process. It was so beautiful seeing this video. I think his name's Christian. I watched it. It's like a 45-minute interview. And he said, it's so cool. He said that, first of all, there's so many souls that are so afraid to come here because it's a very dense experience and you forget everything. There's a thick veil, at least within this to point in time. And I'm sure there's a million timelines and universes, but let's just speak as if we're in this one. So he said that when he went through the incarnation process, it's sort of like you get in an elevator and you go down and it's like a dial's being turned. It's like, and you just slowly forget everything and forget. And he said it's really scary. And so in his first incarnation process, he remembered getting to the womb and it's just black. And he was panicking. And his spirit guides were there with him. And it's okay. You know you've been here before. You can do this. It's great. And he fought his way out of it. And the baby died because he chose, I don't want this. And then he came out and there was a life review. And in this life review, it's beautiful because you recognize that he said, I was looking down on earth and I saw that when the baby that was me died, I saw the ripple of negativity, sadness, anger, rage, all the different emotions that it caused all the souls that were currently in their incarnation process. At the same time, when I was looking at it, I could recognize that it was perfect and that it's okay because they're all souls, even though they may not currently be remembering it. So then he did what was called the incarnation training process, where you sort of go into a simulator that helps you find peace in that process of forgetting everything. And then with enough training and practice, you can make the incarnation and happen. And he did it. And one of his things that he really wanted to be able to have was a remembrance of the incarnation. He said that when you're picking the life, it's sort of like a massive tree with a million roots, and you get to see there's infinite timelines, but there's probabilities to each timeline, and it's so up to you. Mm-hmm. But there are probabilities in a certain sense. So if you have a lot of great karma, it's likely to work out great, but there also is still that chance that you might be in hell and you might completely fall and crash on the scale of consciousness. So I thought that was so powerful and so beautiful, because some people say, well, the movie's already written. You're just experiencing it. I've never resonated with that. I never liked that. Some people who follow Kabbalah specifically have mentioned this to me. Well, they say in Kabbalah, the movie's already written. I said, yeah, but like, I could punch you in the face right now if I wanted to. You can't tell me that's already written. There's infinite possibilities. We can do anything we want in this very moment, and it's spontaneously happening. It's not destined. It's not predetermined. And I think there's a subjective awareness that that's true. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. You know, Sam Harris has a PDF out there for free if you're interested.
Okay.
It talks about free will, and it's a whole, conversation about free will. And ultimately, spoiler alert, he's like, we don't have it. He suggests we don't have free will. And part of that goes into like brain biases ultimately, but it comes into like a biological question. Like, again, you didn't choose your blue eyes. You didn't choose this body. You had no free will over that. You had no choice over that. And yet there is, even if it's a narrow window, choice over what you do now that you do have that body. You could say, well, I have no free will over heroin. You could say that, and you could be right. You could have a lot of people say, oh, that's true, because heroin's just so addictive, and you could go off the rails and never come back from it. And I've never tried it. There's no desire on my part to try it. I think there's even fear that if I tried that, I might lose myself in something so addictive as a substance like that, even with all this consciousness talk. Yeah. And ultimately, I think I'm strong to a certain degree, and I don't know what would happen. So there is a certain sense of that free will sort of being taken away by physical substances. And what if someone just shot you up with heroin, right? It wasn't your quote unquote choice. So some of those powerful drugs, even talking about the placebo effect, how strong are we really? And I think the question then of life is, who are we really? I think that's what the question of life is. And I think about someone like Stephen Hawking, who was, born with a DNA determined condition. Yeah. That put him in a wheelchair and challenged all of his ways of communicating with the external world. He could do it through the computer. But he said at some point, when he was looking out the window at people playing, did he miss that? He's like, yeah, I miss it. I wish I could go do that, but I can't. Yeah. And so he embraced what he could do with what he had. And I think that's the question of life. We don't get to choose our DNA. If you've got addiction in your family, some people are like, well, this person was an alcoholic, that person was an alcoholic, and I have that gene. That could be true. Maybe the gene is addiction. Maybe it's not alcohol. Maybe it's cocaine. Maybe it is opioids. I don't know. But what I do know is that I have a narrow window of choice being in that vehicle. Maybe the vehicle, my friend and I were talking about this, kind of like a fire truck. Fire truck goes to a building that's on fire with the intent to be in service towards those people and help. Yeah. And the driver goes to a certain place, but you're not the driver in this scenario. You're the one on the cherry picker. I'm the one on the cherry picker. And so you and I, we get sent up to this window, and within that we have a fire hose and training, and so we can choose to help. But we didn't get to choose where that truck showed up. Right. We didn't even maybe get to choose to be firefighters, maybe whatever it is. So the point is that there's some things that are predetermined that I didn't choose, you didn't choose. And so I tend to think like, okay, if that's true, that there's a lot of predetermination. Deepak Chopra says that only 5% of the DNA is indicative of who we are. right? So if you had, for example, a gene for an illness,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you're going to get ill with that thing.
Correct. Yeah.
95% of it is determined through simple awareness, conscious awareness, and choice. So I think that then is my responsibility to say, within that window, however big or small that window appears to be, that's how I'm going to show up.
Epigenetics is a good case for that. And if people aren't familiar with epigenetics, it's just essentially how your beliefs shape your genes. Am I correct in saying that?
I believe so.
Yeah. Bruce Lipton was the one who discovered epigenetics. Powerful. I think he wrote the book Power of Belief. And that was the introductory to epigenetics, and it blew the world away because the whole classic "you are your genes" was kind of destroyed. I think quantum physics also plays into this a lot, where we're starting to realize just how interconnected everything is, and how I also feel that window, that small window that we have that allows us to control certain things, if you would say that, is really infinite. And there are limitations. The body is one of them. But I find that if you still have an ego, lowercase s self, say you're not enlightened yet, I feel that this is where I am. I still have this aspect of ego in me. I'll have moments where it feels wow. But then there is sort of a chooser that's there. There's sort of a mind that's filtering through the infinite levels of information. But if you look at Jesus Christ and you recognize some of the incredible moments where he would bring back someone to life, and then one of his disciples is in absolute agony because he wants Jesus to bring back somebody that he lost. And he goes to his disciple and says, "It's not in my Father's will to do that." It's so interesting because here's this incredible enlightened being, an avatar, a perfect mirror of God, who from the outside perspective would perceive to be someone that can do anything, but then will look you in the eyes and say, "No, I can't do that. That is not within my Father's will." So then you have to zoom out and think, whoa, okay. So if you get to that level of consciousness where you can heal people and stuff, and you can perform miracles, is it actually you perform it? No. And to what degree can you actually control it? It's so interesting, that window of control that we have. And I find that as the consciousness level just goes up, the degree to which we think we can control goes down, and you just kind of become more and more the conduit, the empty vessel that just things flow through. And I think it touches on this point that you were making.
If you choose to do it, right? Because you could be a conduit that sits at home, only watching TV, ordering pizza, never leaving your place, and becoming sick with whatever you're consuming. Yeah. So that's also a possibility. There is a choice in all this. And, and there's an activation, there's action that goes into life. And so when an inspiration comes to you, what do you choose to do with that? And everyone will do something specific. It's like, maybe I'll give you two examples here. One is, imagine that you love sleep. Sleep is restorative, sleep is useful, and yet people are always biohacking, right? What can I learn about this, and what can I do about that? And so there are moments during our sleep where we have profound realizations, where our unconscious or subconscious is going into solving a problem. Okay. And there's a guy, I want to say, I'll probably mispronounce it. It's Mendeleev was he's a Russian guy. Okay. And he was looking at all of these different particles and compounds and basically saying there's got to be some rhyme or reason to how they're organized. And he spent most of his life attempting to figure it out.
Wow.
There was a particular time when he was up for 36 hours just banging his head against that proverbial wall you're talking about, attempting to solve this. He had a dream, and when he woke up, he had the periodic table.
Whoa.
And so that's pretty extraordinary, right? He was choosing in one conscious way to push and push and push and push, and then it came to him in a dream. And how many stories are there like that, whether it's a musical artist or a painter or whoever it is that says, I got this in a dream.
Yep.
So that, I think, is where inspiration, when I think about inspire and expire is the last thing we do as a mortal being. We expire, we let out all the air in our lungs, and that's our final breath. That's expiration, the expiration date. We all have one of them.
Yeah.
We can't see where it's printed on us, but there's an expiration date.
Somewhere.
And the inspiration is when life is breathed into us in that moment of after coming out of the uterus you're talking about, in that womb, and there you are, you're a baby in this world. You've been inspired with air for the first time, which burns the lungs, right? So Edison, for example, had these balls, these steel balls he would hold in his hands as he went to sleep. And he put pans below him, and as he started to fall asleep, the ball would drop out of his hands, hit the pan, wake him up, and whatever was happening at that moment, he would then attempt to capture that, and invention after invention after invention after invention, right? And he even said, I'm not a good inventor and whatever else, but who knows if that's humility or him just taking a lot of shots at the net. And so it's like we have this within us. Now what's the choice to do that? So whether you go and get a full night's sleep or whether you choose to go off and explore the dreams, the next question is, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
You have this inspiration. How do you take that into action?
Yes. Yeah. I agree. There is that action. There is that choice. And that determines just where our levels of consciousness go. It also reminds me that when Jesus was presented by the devil the opportunity to, here's everything in the world, he could have made that choice. And that's really beautiful. Another choice that Jesus made that was really powerful, I think it's one of the most powerful moments in his lifetime, was the final moment where, are you familiar with "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do"?
That's part of my meditation every night.
Wow. So Ra speaks of Jesus very highly. They say he was an incredible being. He did wonders for the world. And in that moment, when he said that, he was 100% cleared of all karma. Had he not forgiven, there would have been a karmic attachment. But because he had forgiven and he had understood from the infinite context that they didn't know what they were doing, he was clear. And that's a decision he made with an awareness that he had.
Beautiful example.
It's a powerful moment.
Beautiful example. You know, we think about the frequency of a word, right? The power of an idea. And forgiveness is one of those examples, right? Forgiveness it's this amazing falsity that we hold, right? And I mean that very intentionally when I say a falsity that we hold. Because if I said, do you grasp this idea? Do you grasp this? Well, no, and you never can, and neither can I, right? Even if I put my hand around this microphone right here, I can't grasp it because I am not the one that's grasping it. Even though I would say this is my hand, right? And there's responsibility. And if I drive, I'm like, those are my hands. Yes, I am responsible for if I make a left or a right, if I use my turn signal or not, or how I get to places. I'm responsible for the vehicle that I'm in, and yet I can never grasp it and never hold it. So the idea that we're holding on to anything is the falsity. And so when we forgive, it's like, oh, because I chose to hold this in some way, right? As a metaphor, right? I'm holding it as a metaphor. And you've probably heard the example of the two monks that walk, and they've taken a vow not to interact with women.
Oh my God, tell me this. I just heard this a week ago, but tell me.
It's brilliant, right? So they come to this river, and they're about to cross the river, and the woman says, I can't cross the river without help. Yeah. And would you carry me across the river? And so the monk says, yes, right? Even though he's made this vow. And so his friend's looking at him saying, what? You can't. And so he carries the woman across the river, sets her down the other side, and the two monks continue walking. And after a while, it's a few hours of just stewing about it, the other monk says, I can't believe you did that, and we took this vow, and how could you break this? And he says, well, look, I put her down 2 hours, and yet you're still, 2 hours ago, and you're still carrying her. And that's what we do. We hold on to these things. So what does it mean to let go? And I think the word forgiveness is a powerful gateway to that question, is to say, who do I need to forgive? First of all, probably me, right? Or maybe that comes later in the process because I think it's somebody else, so I have to forgive them first to realize that I was the one that had the volition. I chose all of this. How did I choose any of this? Okay. Yeah. So if you were to look at a scenario, like I can look back at my childhood and be like, I was unloved at that moment, or I felt unloved at that moment. And I might look at a parent and say, they were responsible. They did this to me. It makes me the victim, makes them the villain, which is an easy storyline. Many movies built around it. Yeah. So what if I were to say, what is the love? How do I look for the love in all of that? Or were someone unsubscribed from the love and they acted from a place of unsubscribing somewhere else? Does that then justify what I do next? Because then I can unsubscribe from the love and treat people a certain way.
Yeah.
So the conscious choice, I think, in forgiveness is looking for the love to say, what's the most loving thing I can do in this moment?
Wow. Oh, so beautiful. Yeah, that's the infinite game right there. And by the way, that story that you shared, I came across it because I'm writing a book. It's written. I'm polishing the manuscript. And it's going to release in March of next year. It's called Koans of I. Are you familiar with koans?
Mm-mm.
Wow. You love koans.
I have so many things to write down after.
What you shared, the story, is a TED Talk or TEDx did a video on YouTube defining what a koan is. And in their definition of the koan, they use the story of the two monks and a few other stories. But that was the first one. And I just watched this 2 weeks ago. It was such a beautiful articulation of what a koan is. I pinned it on the Instagram page, Koans of I, or somewhere. And a koan is a paradoxical statement or riddle that is traditionally used in Zen Buddhism by someone that is basically facilitating a class, or a guru, that's someone that has students before them. In meditation, they will say this koan, and it's designed to help invoke enlightenment. It's something that the mind cannot process. Therefore, you have to go to the heart to understand it, or release the mind and enter the state of no mind. So a classic koan is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Have you heard that one? Yeah. So that's a koan.
The Simpsons answered it like this.
That's a simple answer. I love that.
With one hand clapping against fingers against palm. Yeah.
So it's such a beautiful, when you were sharing that story, I thought, wow, this is so incredible and synchronistic and amazing. And I felt the whole time that this is going to be an incredible episode and the conversation is going to be wondrous. But you would love the koans that I've written. They're so beautiful. And this book is just full of little short sort of riddles that you can only understand if you see it through a non-dualistic lens.
Yes.
And I love, love, love stories like the two monks.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this time together. I would invite, if you want, we could play the gift card round for
Let's
a
do
moment
it.
Here. And so use that card in front of you.
Okay.
That's the reference card that has all the 8 characters on there.
This looks like the scale of consciousness. I love it so much.
And you might notice those are the chakras.
Yes.
We added one. You have the 7 sort of traditionally known chakras, like the root and the solar plexus and the throat and the third eye. And we added a meta, which is the listener.
Wow. Oh, I love that. Do you want me to read through these?
Yeah, go quick with the words, sure.
Okay, we'll go from the bottom to the top. Facilitator, one who invites the players to share. Curiositor, explores the what-if moment. Self-aware, one who considers an aha moment. Purveyor of love, enjoys connection. Storyteller, one who adds extra color and context. Appreciado, reflects on an insight of gratitude. Inspirator, one who liberates a moment. And the listener, enjoys listening deeply.
Mm-hmm. All right. So here's what I would invite is pick a card for yourself, and I'm going to pick one for you as well. In other words, just look at the bottom of the card. So I'm going to turn these upside down.
Okay.
And I want you to look at the card and figure out which character and then find the corresponding color and take that card, just looking at the character at the bottom, not the prompt at the top.
Yeah.
Put it face down in front of you. And I'm also going to find a card for you, which I think best represents how our interaction was during this time, the archetype.
I'm finding one for you.
You're finding one for you.
Okay.
And I'm finding one for you. And then we'll switch. And
Okay, cool.
We'll
Give me context. Help me understand this. One who liberates a moment. What does that mean?
liberation and inspiration, I think, can go together. So I would say consider how those two words have some synergetic existence together.
Yes, got it. Okay. Should I read it?
Okay, go. What you got?
Have you ever been in your own way?
Do you want to do the top or the bottom?
Oh,
So did you pick that card for yourself based on that character or because of the question?
character.
Okay, so what character?
Character is listener.
Okay.
Enjoys listening deeply with an open heart and mind.
So tell me more about how you picked that for yourself.
You know, I love beautiful conversations. I'm typically the person who speaks the least. And usually it's because I'm in groups of people where I don't necessarily feel inspired to share what I would want to talk about, the level of depth that I would want to talk about, because what I'm seeing manifest in front of me is a level of depth that is maybe not where I would want the conversation to be. And I don't necessarily feel called to sort of interject and be like, let's go here. I'll typically just listen. That's just where I usually am. But being here with you and being in any podcast is so beautiful because I have the opportunity to cultivate the prompts and sort of set the context and not necessarily not necessarily steer the conversation, but build a sort of container around it and say, this is maybe where we're going to live and be. And it was really beautiful listening to everything that you shared, and I felt, whoa, so much is coming through me that it hasn't come through me in a long time because of your capacity to, one, understand what's being said, and two, prompt for deeper insights or awareness around what we're discussing. So I've really enjoyed listening to you because it's felt like I'm listening to me in a certain sense, where I'm just, wow, this is so beautiful and infinite.
I have a gratitude card for you on that.
Aw.
That one's yours.
It's me.
I love how you said that. I think you're a very good listener, and I've felt moments where in the same scenario you're talking about, where the conversation isn't what you might like, wanting to steer it, and this game, in a way, sharing this game was a way to do that.
So beautiful.
What if we had a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
What if we held a space to listen? And that's what I think you do. In fact, the first card I pulled for you, and I'll tell you which one I actually did. First card I pulled for you was facilitator, because you are, through this podcast and who you are, facilitating.
Aww.
So you're holding that space. You're opening up a container for this conversation. This conversation happened because you opened the space for it. And then we were both able to come into this. So we have ideas from you and me, and then the synergy of it's neither one of us, but the realizations we have through the interaction of what you shared. So I think that's one of the most profound things a facilitator does, is they fade themselves and allow for that third thing to come into space where everyone's benefited. And that's the synergy of the moment. What I did choose for you is purveyor of love. And this one says, enjoy deeper connection, giving and receiving more love. And that was, when I first met you, what I felt from you, just a pervasive beingness of love, being in love with everything. And that's just who I perceive you to be. And it takes courage to have a conversation about this. I mean, I don't know what you got paid in this moment. I didn't get paid. Nobody's
Zero.
The trees are giving us shade, and we didn't have to pay the trees. And the grass is getting water from the sky, and there was no transaction. And so that is natural. That is how it's supposed to be. And so I see you as being a loving being, wanting to share this because of the importance of the conversation to you.
Oh, me. That was so well said and so beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So now we'll switch. I'm gonna pick a card for me, and you're invited to do the same.
Should I read this or no?
Well, we can, but the intent was I
Just
think,
to
just look at.
Okay,
the,
got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We call this the gift card round.
Understood.
Because they're like they're gifts.
So now we pick for you.
Right.
I pick one for you. And you pick one for you. This is so cool, dude. I mean, I would love to do a whole thing on just how you even created this and where all of it came from. So many. It's so multi-dimensional. Yeah. Wow. This is the one.
You got the one?
I got the one.
Okay. I got one. You can go first.
Okay. Storyteller. One who adds extra color and context to their share. Your ability to weave words together is fucking insane. Your ability to speak in ways that are visually understood in a simplistic manner are so off the charts. I found that there were so many moments where you were saying things, but I was seeing what you were saying because you were giving these banging your head against the proverbial wall or whatever analogies or different things that you were giving. And it made it so easy to listen and understand to what you were saying, even though what you were sharing was oftentimes such a infinite macro grand cosmic context to whatever the thread was at the given time. And the stories that you shared so many different stories. You shared stories about the guy the dome guy, I don't remember his name. You shared stories of Prana Yogananda, all these different beings. And it added so much color to the conversations that we were having because you're pulling in. I saw you as sort of like an infinite book of references and you were just kind of like, yes, this person and this person and this person and this story. And it really, I felt kind of like binded everything together to allow me to really understand what not only you were saying, but what we were saying together and what we were talking about. It's probably the most well-articulated podcast person I've ever had a conversation with. I'm 47 episodes deep. And I have the utmost love for everybody else and how they speak, but your speaking abilities are incredible. I don't think you stuttered once. I don't think I heard a single filler word. It's something that I've been working on recently. I'll share this with you. And I feel that I was able to hold this because, one, being in your presence, but two, the timing of this is divine. I've been watching some of the episodes that we've been releasing. We filmed about 47 total, and then we started releasing. So they're from a year and a half ago. They're getting dripped out. In the early episodes, the word "like" would come out of my mouth every 30 to 60 seconds when I was speaking. And I was watching the recording, panicking. Babe, come watch this. Tell me, what do you notice? And she says, I don't know. Seems fine. She was also doing it in an episode. Babe, we're both saying the word "like" a million times.
Like a lot.
A lot. And so I woke up this morning, I'm eating breakfast with Claudia. Babe, one of my intentions in this episode is to not speak words that don't need to be spoken. Sort of, she's calling right now as I'm speaking to her. I'll call her back shortly since we're about to end. And you are incredible in your articulation. So
thank you.
That's why I chose a storyteller.
That means a lot. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Me.
I think you're a fantastic podcast host.
Thank you.
And you do a great job to hold space for possibilities.
This was my best episode.
It's amazing.
No likes.
It's amazing. Hopefully there are lots of likes.
Lots of likes. Yeah.
I chose Appreciato for myself. And it says, reflect on an insight of gratitude and appreciation. And these moments of deep connection are so meaningful to me. And, the cards, the dice, they don't mean anything until we choose to dive in and take that courage to talk about something a little bit different than maybe we do every day.
Yes.
And hopefully we get to have lots of loving conversations. They may not all look or feel or sound like this, and yet this one did. This was really beautiful, and I'm learning new things from you, more things I want to write down, and a video I want to watch. And so for me, this was very deep and enjoyable.
Me too.
So I appreciate you, period.
Yay! We did it! We did it! We did it! How much time do you think went by?
2 hours.
2 hours and 10 minutes.
That's pretty good.
You're on the dot. And that is all. I'm going to put your Instagram in the description. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then we'll have to... Do you have a wait list for the game?
We do. It's a pre-sales page that's up. We just...
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we'll put that in the description.
Fantastic.
And then whatever social profiles you want, I'll get them from you, and we'll put them there.
You got it, man. We'll play it forward.
Yay! Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
It was incredible.